The community, various species living close enough for potential interaction. In the level of organization, above the community is the ecosystem, which includes living and non-living things. So in the ecosystem, there's abiotic and biotic things. And then below the community, it's the population, which is a group of individuals of the same species. And that leads us to community, which is a group of species. So population, which is smaller, which is only all of the individuals of the same species, like all of the cat or all of the cow. And then in a community, it's a group of species. I mean, you have a mix of them, which is like you have a bunch of cow with sheep and birds. And then the ecosystem, it's a community, and then you also include non-living things like water and wind and such. So we're learning about community. In a community, when different species live together and they interact, there has to be good and bad things and different types of interaction. There are 5 types of interactions. There's competition, predation, herbivory, symbiosis, and disease. Under competition, there's 4 subcategories: competitive exclusion principle, ecological niches, resource partitioning, and character displacement. For this video, we're going to focus on ecological niches. So before we go into the definition of ecological niches, just want to introduce you to some basic stuff. First, a house. So a house is a place where you live versus a home. A home is a place where you enjoy living. So ecological niches has 2 things, a habitat and niche. Habitat is the area or natural environment in which an organism or population normally lives. Habitat is made up of physical factors such as soil, moisture, range of temperature, light, and other biotic factors, availability of food, and predators. Whereas a niche is the sum of total species use of the biotic and abiotic sources in its environment. So you can think of a niche as the home, whereas the habitat is the house. So here you have a picture of a house. If you enjoy living there, it can also be your home. So it can both be a house and a home. But if you don't enjoy living there, then it's nothing but just a house. This, on the other hand, is not a house. But if you enjoy living there, it can be a home. So it can be a home, but not a house. So here we have an example of a habitat. And then you can have organism A that lives here, that's their niche. And then organism B over here, that's their niche. Now there's 2 types of niche. One is called a fundamental, the other one is realized. Fundamental niche is a niche potentially occupied by that species, whereas the realized niche is the niche that it actually occupies. For example, here we have a habitat of oyster that lives in the ocean, and it also lives on the sand area as well. So this habitat, the whole habitat itself, is also the fundamental niche that the oyster occupies. Then comes a different species of oyster that competes for it. So the fundamental niche is still the full range that the oyster, the first one, could still occupy. However, because the new oyster came, now it only has a small portion of the niche. It's called a realized niche. And then the new oyster, the bottom part, is their realized niche. When a new species invades a habitat, 2 things could happen. One, it either takes over the whole place, called the competitive exclusion principle, or it doesn't take over the whole thing, it only takes part of it, that's called resource partitioning. One of the category of competition is competitive exclusion principle, which we did not cover. But what it is simply when 2 organisms are in the same place, they're going to compete each other for the resource, and one of them is going to outcompete the other, and so the other one will go extinct. That's the competitive exclusion principle. But in this case, since luckily the blue oyster only occupied the realized niche at the bottom, and it couldn't survive on the top part because it's probably too hot or something, so it has to split up the resource for both of these guys, which is now called resource partitioning. Let's look at ecological niche and habitat at a more fundamental level. Here you have a habitat, and there in this habitat live organism A. Organism A occupied this much niche. That means organism A only goes here, but organism A avoids the garage and the basement because organism A is afraid of that. So therefore, in the habitat, the niche is only the top portion. It is also the fundamental niche of organism A because that's what organism A decides. He wants the whole thing within that niche. Then a year later, organism B invades the habitat. Now, if organism B were to take over the whole thing, it would be the competitive exclusion principle. Fortunately, that's not the case. So organism B now only occupies this portion of the habitat. And then organism A, the fundamental niche, is now reduced to a small portion, which is now the realized niche. So both organism A and B, their realized niche is just a portion of the whole habitat. Because it's like, okay, you have your own room, I have my own room, we don't share, you have your place, and when I'm here, you're not here, and they're in sibling rivalry. So then they're splitting up the resources. That's called resource partitioning. And each organism occupy a certain section of the habitat, and that became their realized niche.